Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I am Jay Lodha. Well, today's topic for discussion is remedies against blacklisting and imposition of penalty by a procuring entity. Now, we all are aware that the order of blacklisting has certain civil consequences and hence it merits an opportunity of being heard as it can effectively cast a slur on a reputation of a company. It is even capable of damaging the reputation entirely. So an order of having such civil consequences should be passed only after following the principles of natural justice because it has certain serious implications upon the future businesses of the concerned person. So today we have with us a promising young lawyer, Mr. Siddharth Bafna, who has in a very short span of time made a name for himself as a successful legal practitioner, as a successful lawyer. Just to give you a brief background, Mr. Bafna completed his BA LLB honors from Institute of Law, Nirma University in the year 2015. He enrolled with Bar Council of Rajasthan in May 2015, and subsequently he completed his master's LLM in 2017 from School of Law, University of California, Berkeley. And he's currently practicing as an advocate before High Court of Rajasthan, Jaipur Bench, and District and Sessions Court, Jaipur, and other forums and tribunals. So thank you so much, Mr. Siddharth Bafna, for taking out time and readily saying yes for a session today. And so the stage is set. The floor is all yours. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jay. It was a very pleasant invitation from you. Highly delighted to be part of this session. It was something very good initiative that you have taken under these tough and challenging times. And I'm sure people are benefiting with the various lectures that or the topics that have been covered up till now. And I hope that we can contribute, make our contribution in a meaningful manner by way of this series. Again, thank you so much for having me for this topic of remedies against blacklisting and imposition of penalty by a procuring entity. I'll just share my screen as well for the viewers. So, like the topic suggests, there are many, we come across regular litigation people face when it comes to tendering, entering into contracts with governments. There are various issues which they face. We'll be restricting ourselves to the two most common issues that they are facing. One is the action of blacklisting and the other of unilateral imposition of penalty by a procuring entity. Now, who are the parties generally in such a situation? Let's just first get on with it. One, we talk about a procuring entity, which is often referred to as a tenderer or the party which issues the tender. It can be any state or central government department, corporation, undertaking, company, anything. They are generally the procuring entity. It can be the contract or any kind of a project, can be for construction services, for water supply like PHED. There can be procurement of goods and services. Like in the past 1.5 years, you all must have come across a lot of medical equipments being supplied to the state government and to the hospitals and everybody. So that these are one of the biggest tenders which have been issued in the past year and a half. And there are services which are taken by the government. Now, this other party is the bidder to whom we are addressing today. Bidders generally, as I said, are contractors, vendors, suppliers. It can be referred to in any manner, in any terminology. They are proprietors, partnerships, companies, all sorts of legal structures are there. They participate in a tender to be supplying their goods, their services, or undertaking any construction activity. Largely, we see the parties or the bidders which quote the lowest bid are awarded the tender after the technical round of qualification is completed, and when the financial round is there, they are generally the lowest bidders who are given the contracts, considering all the other terms and conditions of a tender and the applicable rules. Now, coming to the topic, what are the types of penalties which are there? So we are talking about blacklisting, which is debarring of a bidder. These are two terms interchangeably used by various procuring entities. Blacklisting or debarring can be for a certain period, for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years. At times it is for an indefinite period also. Having blacklisting or debarring for an indefinite period, I would pause here and say that it is a disproportionate penalty which can never be imposed by any procuring entity. They may have a power of blacklisting or debarring under certain conditions, but they can never impose a lifelong ban or blacklist a particular bidder for all times to come. It can only be for a limited duration of period. Can be 6 months. It ranges between 6 months to 3 years. But keep one thing in mind, that it can never be for eternal, for all times to come. Then the blacklisting or debarring is for a particular product, in pursuance to which the issues must have arisen. Let's say a bidder or a contractor was supplying certain product and he defaulted in the supplies, or there was an issue of quality in the product, and the ensuing action, apart from maybe the pecuniary liability that may be imposed, is blacklisting also. So blacklisting can only be for that particular product. It can never be for all types of products that are being supplied or taken up by a procuring entity. Let's say, for example, the medical corporation in Rajasthan is entrusted with the task of procuring all types of medical devices, drugs, surgical sutures from different vendors, from different contractors, bidders. Now, a bidder may be manufacturing multiple products. It cannot be a case where they are supplying 4 products, and just because there is a problem with one product, they be blacklisted for all other products as well. Again, I will fall back to the argument of disproportionate penalty being imposed. So the Supreme Court very clearly, and the other high courts as well, honorable high courts and Supreme Court, have said that the penalty cannot be disproportionate to what the wrong has been. So you cannot blacklist or debar any bidder for all products which have nothing to do with the probable wrong which may have been committed by the bidder or the supplier. Now, there is another form of penalty which is generally imposed by a procuring entity, that is in the form of pecuniary liability or penalties. And most common form is forfeiture of the earnest money or the bank guarantees that the bidders deposit with the procuring entity at the time of entering into the contract with the procuring entity. So what happens is, I'll just pause here for a minute and make you understand. What happens is, whenever a bidder submits the bid for a tender, first he has to qualify technically that he possesses all the technical qualifications, the required amount of experience, the turnover, and XYZ. Once he qualifies, then there is financial bid. In the financial bid, if you are L1, quite naturally, it is likely that you are being issued the contract, the work order, and you enter into the agreement with the procuring entity for supply of the products for a particular period or number of pieces. At that time, the procuring entity generally has the rule, has a rule or a condition that you have to deposit bank guarantee or earnest money with the procuring entity in order to secure their interest, so that if the supplier defaults or does not supply in time, they have other recourses, and they generally levy it as a pecuniary liability when you default and do not supply the product in time. Another is the liquidated damages also, which are being imposed for, in all likelihood, for delayed supply supplies. So if some product is to be supplied in 15 days, if it is supplied in 20 days, then they impose liquidated damages as per the formula which is devised in their terms and conditions. For construction activities or for water supply projects, if a project is to be completed within 3 years, they have a certain timeline and review mechanism that if by 1/4 period of time so and so work is not done, so and so amount of liquidated damages will be imposed. There is a periodical review. And if those milestones are not achieved in those periodical reviews, there is generally imposition of liquidated damages. And the third kind of pecuniary liability is of risk and cost clauses. What are risk and cost clauses are? Supposedly, if you enter into an agreement for supplying 10 lakh pieces at the rate of 20 rupees, the amount comes to near about 2 crores for the entire agreement. Supposedly, you default or falter in not supplying those products to the concerned procuring entity at that rate. You only supply 5 lakh products and you're unable to supply the next 5 lakh for whatever reasons. They generally have a risk and cost clause which says that if you are unable to supply the remaining pieces which you had promised earlier, then for procuring the other 5 lakh, if we have to place another order to some other supplier, issue tender, and if the rate is higher, let's say you are supplying at 20 and the other bidder quotes 22, so the difference of 2 rupees that will also be imposed on you. So whatever extra that they have to pay, those are the risk and cost clauses which they generally invoke. Now, what are the issues which concern, what are the defenses that we may have when it comes to blacklisting orders? So you must keep in mind that although blacklisting may be permitted under the terms and conditions of the tender or under the procurement policy of a particular state. So when we talk about procurement policies, we're sitting in Rajasthan. So Rajasthan has Rajasthan Transparency in Public Procurement Act. It is quite similar in some of the other states as well, where they have Transparency in Public Procurement Act. Some states do not have such an act. When it comes to the center, they have a manual for procurement of goods of 2017. So all of these manuals, these acts, these rules, and on top of that, the terms and conditions of a particular tender have clauses which give them power to blacklist or debar a particular bidder for non-compliance to the terms and conditions or for violating any terms and conditions or not supplying or refusing to supply or supplying faulty products or giving inferior services. Having said that, there is a proper procedure which needs to be followed, which stems from the fact of principles of natural justice. Principles of natural justice, cardinal principles of Audi Alterum Partem, says no one can be condemned unheard, even if it is a clear case of a bidder defaulting or a bidder not complying with the terms and conditions. There will have to be a proper procedure which needs to be followed. So what starts is, the first step is the issuance of show cause notice by the procuring entity. And that show cause notice has to have two very essential elements. One, the conditions which formulate or which are the basis on which show cause notice has been issued. The conditions, when I say conditions, I mean the situations or the fault on the part of the on the part of the bidder, which are the genesis for issuance of show cause notice or on the basis of which the action is proposed to be taken. And the second is obviously the action which is proposed to be taken, which is an extremely important requirement as laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court in successive judgments. which I will be referring to in a short while. The second step is grant of hearing. Personal hearing is a mandatory requirement. So you have to give a show cause notice. The show cause notice has to have two very essential elements. One, the wrong which has been committed on the basis of which action is to be taken, and the proposed action which is required to be taken or which is proposed to be taken. And second, that you have to seek reply to the show cause notice and grant a personal hearing to the concerned bidder or whatever entity it may be, so that it is given a chance to explain why such an action should not be initiated against them. And third is a reasoned order, that why show cause notice was issued, why so and so action was proposed, and on the basis of the hearing granted, the reply received, why it is not considered proper and why the action is required to be taken anyhow. Now, an important aspect of that is that the decision has to be given by the person who conducts the hearing. It is an essential part of the administrative law also that the person who grants the hearing only has to give the decision. Consider a situation where a managing director of the corporation is empowered to give the decision on a blacklisting issue. Let's say X person holding that position of managing director of the corporation issues you show cause notice, grants you hearing, but by the time he gives a decision, he's transferred or he demits the office, and some another person, Mr. Y, joins. Now, the principles of administrative law are very clear. They say that the person who hears, the person who grants the hearing only can issue the order. So he will have to again grant a fresh hearing because he will have to apply his mind, and the application of mind can only be on the basis of hearing the concerned bidder entity on their own. It cannot be a borrowed satisfaction from the other officer. With regards to issues concerning imposition of penalty, again, I will not elaborate a lot on the first two requirements, which are show cause notice and hearing, grant of hearing. So obviously I have explained it is part of the principles of natural justice. The other two issues are very important. Decision by a party to contract and determination of breach. So when we talk about unilateral imposition of a pecuniary liability or penalty, we are presupposing that there is a breach in the terms and conditions by the bidder. There is a breach in the terms and conditions by the bidder. But consider a situation where the bidder is challenging or disputing the breach. Now, what will happen in that situation? Because you must understand that even though it's the state government or the central government or their department or undertakings or corporations entering into the contract, at the end of the day, it is a contract. It is a contract entered into between two parties where one party solely, unilaterally cannot say that you have committed so and so breach and hence I have the right to determine the breach also and to enrich myself because you have committed such and such breach. Now, this stems from another principle of natural justice, which says no one can be a judge in his own cause, right? So the determination of breach has to be by a third party when it is disputed by a party to the contract. So if the government says that you have committed so and so breach, but I say that no, I have not committed the breach, it is you who has committed the breach, and because of that I have not been able to perform, the determination will have to be by a third party, by an arbitrator, by a court of law, whatever mechanism is given under the terms and conditions of the tender or the contract, eventual contract which is entered into between the parties. And such a decision given by one party to the contract can always be challenged in a court of law. And we'll go to what are the remedies against both of these actions. Against blacklisting, largely there are two remedies, and 99% of the times it is one remedy which is to be availed, which are writ petitions before the concerned High Court under Article 226 of the Constitution of India. The other remedy is preferring an appeal before the concerned officer or an official who is designated by some guidelines which are issued by that department. It is, I would say these conditions are not very prevalent, but some departments who are extremely vigilant about their procurement policies and who have actually had a lot of experience about such actions, such situations, have recently issued guidelines about redressal mechanism against blacklisting orders. So I have come across a few departments which have issued such guidelines, and they provide for an appeal mechanism before an appellate authority within their own department, that you first have to challenge the blacklisting order before so-and-so officer, which is generally the departmental head, the principal secretary or the additional chief secretary. And then you can approach the High Court. But largely it is the High Court which you have to approach against blacklisting in most of these situations. The second, against imposition of penalty or pecuniary liability. Again, there are two types of remedies. One is appeal before a committee or an officer which is notified by the concerned department under their guidelines or their orders. The other is writ petition. And there is third remedy, which is a civil suit. Now, in which condition you go in a civil suit and a writ petition will depend on what stage you are and what action has been taken by the concerned department. The first stage is that they issue a show cause notice, they grant you hearing, and then they issue the order. Once they issue the order, as soon as they issue the order, you can approach the High Court if the amount has not been deducted and the bank guarantee or the earnest money has not been forfeited. But if the amount has been deducted from your payments or the bank guarantee has been enforced or earnest money has been forfeited, once the money is with the government, you will have to file a civil suit for recovering that amount, because in all likelihood 99% times the High Court will never pass an order to reverse the amount which has already been deducted. Because if you challenge the order at the first instance before the money is deducted or they appropriate the amount, you may still have a chance that the High Court passes a stay order, and the proceedings may take time, and ultimately they may reject or they may set aside, they quash the order which was passed by the other side. So we move on to the relevant judgments and the principles that these judgments have laid down over a period of time. When it comes to blacklisting, the most landmark of them is the Erusian Equipment and Chemicals Limited versus State of West Bengal and another. Now remember, the first time I spoke about blacklisting, I said there are two very important conditions which are required in a show cause notice. One is what wrong has been committed by the concerned bidder, and second, what action is proposed to be taken. Now, Erusian Equipment is a 3 judges bench order judgment. And that was one of the first judgments in 1975, which talks about blacklisting having civil consequences and that it cannot be resorted to without complying with the principles of natural justice or without giving a show cause notice to the bidder. The same goes with Joseph Velangadan, as also Raghunath Thakur versus State of Bihar. Now, when it comes to Gorkha Security Services and the latter judgments from 2014, 19, 21 and 21, Daffodils, Wet India, UMC Technologies Private Limited. Again, Wet India is 3 judges bench, the others are 2 judges bench, division bench orders. These judgments not only say that you have to grant a personal hearing, issue a show cause notice and personal hearing to the bidder against whom action is supposed to be taken, but these judgments very categorically lay down the principle that the action which is proposed to be taken has to be clearly spelled out in the show cause notice which is issued to the bidder. These judgments, in all these 4 landmark judgments, the controversy settled. In fact, they go on to say that only by mentioning that appropriate action as per the terms and conditions of the tender will be taken is insufficient. Even if all the ingredients are present, even if show cause notice is issued, even if hearing is granted and action is taken of blacklisting, but a mere absence of the word blacklisting in the show cause notice will render that particular action to be illegal. And there is one caveat to it, one exception to it. And that exception is that if you mention the terms or the condition of the tender which proposes blacklisting, so that it is clear from the show cause notice that action of blacklisting is proposed to be taken. That is the only exception. Otherwise, you have to make a mention of the term blacklisting or debarring in the show cause notice itself, because these judgments say that the person who is granted hearing must know what action is proposed to be taken, and that is the true compliance with the principles of natural justice and not otherwise. So these were the important judgments on blacklisting. Now, when we come to imposition of pecuniary liability, these are the 3 important judgments. There are others also, but 1 and 3 from the Supreme Court are the guiding principles. So, State of Karnataka versus Sri Rameshwara Mills, 1987 2 SCC 160. I'm just going to read out the relevant passage. Very clearly, the Supreme Court says that a party which is a party to the contract will never have the power to assess damages. I will just read out the passage which says, it cannot also be argued that a right to adjudicate upon an issue relating to a breach of the conditions of the contract would flow from or is inherited in the right conferred to assess the damages arising from a breach of conditions. So this was one of the first judgments which said that you are a party to the contract and you may be the government, but that does not give you the right to assess the damages also, assess the breach also, adjudicate upon the breach, and then assess the damages also. If it is an admitted position, then it is a different situation altogether. Because once it is admitted and not disputed, then there is nothing to adjudicate. But if it is not admitted, it is disputed between the parties to the contract, then it will have to be adjudicated as per the dispute resolution clause that you may have in the contract or the terms and conditions of the tender. Consider a situation, and I have come across this situation quite often nowadays, that it is quite common also, that you are contracted to supply. We'll again go back to those supplying 10 lakh pieces of any good or product to the procuring entity. And what happens is you supply in batches. So 20,000, 50,000, again 20,000. And the payment terms are that your payment will be cleared within 30 days from the date of delivery of product. At times what happens is that there is a delay in payment from the side of the government. And because of the delay, there is a break in the manufacturing cycle of the manufacturer, because it affects the capital requirements and the payment cycle is also affected. So it has a bearing on the manufacturing capacity of the bidder. And because of large delays in receiving payments from the government, there are often delays in making timely supplies to the government. And not making timely supplies would again amount to imposition of liquidated damages, as we've seen earlier, and at times imposition of graver penalties like forfeiture of earnest money and then eventually blacklisting. So in those situations, the government says you have made delayed supplies, so we will impose penalty on you. On the flip side, the contractor says, or the supplier vendor would say, that the delay in supply stems from the fact that you made delay, or first of all, there was delay in making payments of earlier supply on your end. Therefore, the breach is on your part, which has resulted in delay of supplies of later purchase order or work orders. Or maybe in construction activities, when you do not make timely payments, there is delay in execution of the project. So these are disputed questions which the government cannot say that we are bound to decide. We will decide and we will assess the damages. So these judgments, all three of them, lay down the principle that no one can be a judge in his own cause. And if it is a disputed question, the government cannot come about and say that we are entitled to forfeiting your earnest money. We are entitled to levying liquidated damages amounting to so and so on you. And we will do it and we will recover the amount. We have often come across many contractors, suppliers, vendors who are afraid to challenge the government, who are afraid that if they challenge such actions, they will not be getting orders. It does not happen so. It is a I would say it is a misconception that they have, which needs to be cleared. They cannot keep accepting the penalties or the punishments that are inflicted upon them, because at times it happens is 3 such penalties may amount to blacklisting. And if you have not challenged the earlier ones, or if you have not protested the earlier ones, they say you have not challenged, so you have admitted, and hence the consequent or resultant action will have to be taken. So in my opinion, the contractors, the bidders, suppliers, vendors have to be extremely vigilant about their rights, about what remedies they have against such high-handed action at times or arbitrary action. And the courts come about and they protect the interest of the vendors, suppliers, bidders, because they understand that these actions do not only have short-term implications, rather they have long-term implications which even amount to closure of a business unit. Suppose, for example, having an order of blacklisting from one particular state or a government undertaking may even render you not qualified or disqualified from participating in other state tenders as well, because every state has a condition that you must not have been blacklisted anywhere else for a particular product. And it may happen that if you are blacklisted for such a long time, the families that you are supporting are unable to, or you are unable to support those families and the employees. So I would conclude by saying that the issues of blacklisting and imposition of unilateral pecuniary liability should be taken up by the concerned contractor at the earliest, and they should never succumb to the high-handed, arbitrary and illegal unilateral action by the government or their undertakings without resorting to the principles of natural justice. If you have any questions, anybody can reach out to me on my email address or may drop a comment to Jay. And I would thank Jay for giving me this opportunity to be part of this wonderful venture initiative in these tough times. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Siddharth Bafna, our amicus for today's session. Another clinical performance by him. And so to all the viewers, in case you still have any queries or any doubts with respect to any of the concepts or fundamentals on the topic for discussion today, then feel free to write to us, or you can email to our speaker directly. We would be more than happy to respond back and to give you the correct advice. So thank you so much once again, Mr. Bafna, for your time. Thank you so much, everybody. Stay tuned. Next episode is on its way. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. And thank you so much for everything. Thank you, Mr. Bafna, once again.
Thank you, Jay. Wonderful initiative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.